Back again for another video. On today's topic, we'll be talking about the selection of a woman. Now, I know, I've talked about this before, but I talked about it in a way that I actually define the difference between selection versus choosing, and also what kind of woman you should select and stuff like this, and the reasons. I didn't really go into. I didn't go into what kind of woman you should select. And a lot of this could be anecdotal, for the individual man. But I think the overall sentiment that I want to make here is that you should select the woman that's on your program. Okay, yes, redundant. Yes, I know. I say that all the time, but I want to make an emphasis on that. And I want to expand on that idea a little bit more. Because me, myself personally, I have selected women who have not necessarily been all the way on my program. And people would say, oh, that's crazy. Why would you select a woman that is not all the way on your program? Well, first off, go back and see my video about the lemon ladder BWs, and that would help you understand, due to the saturation, right? But also because I have a different approach to interpersonal relationships a lot of times. I've told my women plenty of times that this isn't going to be a regular relationship how you think, because a lot of times when women think of regular relationships, they think of the ownership of a man. I'm gonna just put it that way. When you go into a relationship, okay, let's put it this way. No man should ever do 50-50. We know this already. I've talked about this before. I made plenty of videos on 50-50 relationships. I think I did a lot last year. But we know why you shouldn't do a 50-50 relationship, because a woman sees you as an equal at that point, monetarily. But there's also going into a relationship as 50-50 without it necessarily being based upon money. And this is in the way that this woman has as much leadership over herself, or excuse me, yeah, she has as much leadership over herself as you do, but also she has as much leadership over she has as much leadership over you as you have over her. That is the other underlying part of that 50-50 that doesn't necessarily have to do with money. And people would think, well, how could one believe that, how could any two people come together and this not be expressed? Because it's how you start the relationship. If you start the relationship off with nothing to achieve from this woman, meaning that she is giving you something and you giving her something as well, that could be, let me rephrase that, because that sounds kind of convoluted. It would be more like if you go into the relationship and the commonality that you guys have in regards to sex, meaning that she gives you some and you kind of get some, you give her some, that's starting the relationship off 50-50. Why? Because she has genitals just like you have genitals. Even though, yes, we do understand that entering a woman not only breeds responsibility, but it also you are giving her your light in some shape, forms, and fashions. You're giving her your light. You're not giving her the full light, because you're more than just your sex, of course, but you are giving her some light, and she is the receiver of that. But the whole idea of two halves is that there's a receptacle, and then there is something that is giving, meaning that I need water in order to fill this cup. So the half of what the ingredients I need in order to have a filled cup of water is that I need, firstly, a cup, and secondly, I need water. When I combine the two, I have filled cup of water. But the problem about that is that women don't understand that the water source is greater than the capacity of the cup. It is you as the man to express this to her in the way that she understands this. Me personally, I like to tell women right off the bat that you're more than likely not going to be the only woman. I mean, and a lot of women, they already come into the circumstance as that, they understand inherently. But if I'm starting off with just one woman, that's initially what I tell her, because this underlying message sends to her that I have more light than your cup can hold in this capacity. So this is not a 50-50 relationship. You see what I'm saying? Now, there are many different ways that you can do this. It's all based upon your creativity and how you want to approach this, because not every guy wants multiple women. But nonetheless, you have to relay to that woman at the start of the relationship that this is not a 50-50 relationship, irregardless of what the monetary input is. You could actually have and this is crazy. I wouldn't suggest you all to try this, okay? I'm not, you didn't hear it on my channel, okay? Okay, but I've done this before. You can have a woman who contributes monetarily more to you than 50-50 in the finances, while it not be a 50-50 relationship. That is higher level though. I'm not saying that the average man can just go out here and do that, because if you approach it like that, you're probably going to mess it up. There are some things that you have to understand ahead of time before you even get to that point where a woman is introducing more money into the lifestyle that you collectively to share together than you are producing in your lifestyle, and you still hold the primary as being the head. That's a total different game. Of course, it's a total different topic. But what the topic here is today is, once again, how to select the woman, right? With a hint of how to avoid the 50-50 relationship, because this should be part of your selection of a woman, is that you are able to relay to her that this is not a 50-50 relationship. That's very important. But anyways, when it comes to the women that I've selected in regards to them not necessarily being on my program, it involves me seeing a part of them that was in me. For instance, I'll give you an example. So, okay, I know you've seen plenty of movies. Let's go with the Mr. Miyagi movies, the Karate Kid. Most people have seen these movies, regardless if they're the one with Will Smith's son or if they're with the other guy, whatever the case. Mr. Miyagi was pronounced throughout the movies, right? That caricature, he represented the knowing teacher, right? The reason why he decided to take on these individuals, even though he had shunned away different individuals in the past, is because he saw some of himself. He saw some of himself as that kid, meaning that kid represented him at one point in time. This is just my speculation, especially coming from a teacher. This is the way that I see it. And that's the reason why he decided to train that individual into becoming greater than what they were, because of the potential in which that he recognized within himself, being akin to that child, or to that individual. That's kind of how I see things. When it comes to these women who are necessarily not all the way on my program, I see them as being a younger version of me. And that may sound strange, because they be like, of course, they're female, I'm male, and I'm masculine, they're feminine, etc. The differences. But what I'm talking about is the degree of consciousness. I'm not necessarily, consciousness doesn't have a gender to it, right? There is no specific nature about it, other than itself. Itself is the nature. So there's nothing to define it other than how it exists. Now, I definitely understand that a woman's consciousness is definitely different than a man's consciousness, because they need that difference in order to make the outcomes necessary when the two come together, right? But what I'm saying is that I'm talking about the level of maturity in the consciousness per se. I'm not necessarily talking about the feminine versus male consciousness aspects or any other thing in regards to that. I'm talking about I see a small version of them from what I used to be in some ways. I used to be just as hard-headed. I used to misunderstand things. I used to take things to the limit that they did. Because once again, we come from, a lot of us come from the same factories. And what I mean by this is the factory of the gynocracy. A lot of us have come from that type of structure, so, we can realize that, wherever we stopped at was the infancy for that point, and it didn't grow anymore. But I recognized a certain level of infancy in the gynocratic mindset that a lot of women have, that I've taken on, who once again are not necessarily on my program. I recognize that in them, and it's akin to where I left off, right? Meaning that I'm not going to pick a woman who's way younger in consciousness than I am, in regards to the point where I started to change over and realize that things are completely different and things are not supposed to be the way they are. I was roughly about, when I started to realize that things were not as what they seemed, I was roughly about 17, 18. And I remember, my memory is so messed up, because I had TBIs and stuff like that. But that's traumatic brain injuries for any of the individuals out there who are wondering, who may not know. But from what I can remember, that's exactly where I left off. I left off at that level of maturity in the gynocracy, but the level of immaturity of actual consciousness, that's where the handover happened for me. It didn't happen at a very young age. But the thing of it is, I didn't engage in the gynocracy as much as other people did. So I was much more closer to being awakened than a lot of people are, as they are, because they chose to mature as much as they did in the gynocracy, whereas I rejected it at that age, and I decided to make my own way. But nonetheless, I see a likeness in them that I once was. And this is the reason why I decided to take them on. But enough about, what they are and how they came about in my life. I'm making this video as a way to say simply that you must establish the teacher and student first. Because that will be always what a woman comes to you as. What she should comes to you as. She should come to you as a student, meaning that she is looking for someone to guide her in the way that she understands that she should be guided. Meaning that once again, for you have to have gone through, for instance, you have to have gone through some level of knowledge and understanding in order to get to where you are. That's for anybody. The experience is the teacher in this case. Therefore, you have to approach women with the same way. Notice that life doesn't ask you questions about how you want things to go. Life doesn't ask you questions about where you should be and how things should be. And life just does what it needs to do in order to get you to where it needs to get you, to put you in the class that you need to be, and according to how well you submit to the tenets that make your life better or worse, right? It's all based on you as the individual, of what you will take from the lessons that life is teaching you in order to make yourself into a better person. This is also how a man should exist in the woman's life, that she should submit to the lessons that are being taught by the man, so that she is able to achieve and make her life better, or once again worse. It's all up to her. But nonetheless, this has to be struck. This teacher-student relationship has to be understood upon the onset of the relationship, so that you do not enter the relationship as 50-50, so that you do not select a woman that is inappropriate for what you have to teach. You must be able to see your younger consciousness in this woman as her highest level of being. And so at some rate, you have to be able to see this. You have to be able to see that she is somewhat on the same path or direction that you are. Maybe she is what you were at 15 years old. You know what I'm saying? Conscious wise, meaning that she comes to you. The woman that you select comes to you in this state of being, because we all understand that, once again, that like attracts. A lot of people think like has to do with stuff like the way a person looks, maybe their financial standings. No, it doesn't really necessarily have to do with those things all the time. It has to do with a level of consciousness, meaning that where you see the individual consciousness being where it's at, you resonate with that, meaning that you share some relation to that level, meaning that you have surpassed to that level, and you can teach how to get further up to where you are as you yourself improve in your own consciousness, right? This is how I select and why I select the women that I do, because I recognize that they are on the same path that I am. It's just that I'm further ahead than they are, and they're trying to get to where I'm going, and that I am on a path that is further than they are, in which they are going in the direction that I'm going, right? Sorry about that. I had a audio switch because I was having some technical difficulties. I'm going to have to get that taken care of. But anyways, on to the topic again. But this is how you want to approach the situation at any point in time. Remember, you're selecting a woman. You're not choosing a woman. You select a woman based upon how she is congruent with what you have going on and what you want going on in your life. This is also from a point of view of the origin of where you came from and in your consciousness, meaning that she has to be on some similar level of consciousness that you are, right? Which means that she doesn't necessarily have to be above you in consciousness. No woman that you select should be above you in consciousness, because you're going to exist in her world and her not in yours, right? That's another thing to keep in mind as well. You have to make sure that you are always in the teacher spot, meaning that majority of things that get discussed in the relationship are coming from your mouth in regards to how things should be. No woman should be dictating you how things should be in the relationship because she necessarily understands more about your pathway than you do. No, she can give suggestions. She can give, accommodations, or she can, hint you at certain things, but no way should she be leading you, which means once again that you should be in the leadership spot. And the woman you select should be a student, meaning that she came to you for knowledge. She came to you for understanding and direction and the leadership that you give, right? This is how you select a woman, based upon your consciousness and your direction, based upon like meeting like. Not necessarily every woman that comes to you is going to be fitted for the level of consciousness that you are, though. For instance, you don't want a woman that's at a 3-year-old consciousness when you're 35 in your consciousness. You understand what I'm saying? That'll be ill-fitted. She has some growing to do before you can even speak to her on a level that she'll understand, right? But a woman who is necessarily 15 in her consciousness, you can work with, because there are some things that she can understand in her consciousness that you could teach her in order to get her to where you are. You can effectively have her skip conscious levels depending on how good of a teacher you are, meaning that she can go from 15 to 30 in just a matter of a year, depending on how much she applies what you're teaching her, even though she may be 40 years old in real life. You got to understand, these women's consciousness levels are immature at best. It goes along with their emotional maturity as well. That also involves a level of consciousness. You can't have a high level of consciousness and a low level of emotional maturity. It's nearly impossible to have those things. And likewise, you can't have a high level of emotional maturity and then low consciousness. That just doesn't happen. They're the left hand and the right hand, right? You can't have one without the other. So oftentimes when I do speak on consciousness, I will talk about the emotional maturity of a woman, because that is very necessary in the way that you're going. And a lot of these women out here, no matter how old they are, like I said, she can be 15, her consciousness, and be 35 years old. She's also 15 in her emotional intelligence, maybe even lower than that, because it is usually your consciousness that gets brought up first, and then it is your emotional intelligence. I can't necessarily say that, because sometimes it's your emotional intelligence that get brought up too, and it opens your consciousness up to other things. So it can flip-flop, but nonetheless, a lot of these women are not adolescents in their consciousness, period. Majority, 99%, damn near, across the world, no matter where you go, this will be the case. Because this society that men have built by certain men included a how can I put it? A stunting of growth, pretty much. It included a stunting of growth of one's consciousness, because you're easier to control when you're unconscious. You're way easier to control. You're way easier to manipulate. Everybody knows this. And especially with your emotional maturity, you're easier to manipulate too, because you can't read through the manipulation. You need a certain level of emotional maturity in itself in order to recognize the manipulation that is going on. And that's essentially what I tried and attempted to teach a lot of women in my lifetime. It's just that their level of consciousness was not able to grasp at times the things that I was giving them. So necessarily, I do not like bringing myself down to a level that is necessary to speak to people in regards to their consciousness. It's either you get it or you don't with me. That's how I operate. That's how I've been operating. I mean, it's unfortunate to the individuals who did not, get past that level, but I have to keep moving forward because I have a job to do. I have things to accomplish. And it's up to you, whether you want to ride this boat or not. I never force anyone to do anything, and I never force anyone to leave either. I'm very neutral in the way one's presence is. I never force anyone to leave. I force their dysfunctions to leave, but never them themselves. Because, when you take on a woman, you are taking on some level of liability, and that liability is included to be her dysfunctions. That's just how it goes. Every man knows this. Every man should know this, rather. But anyways, when it comes to the selection of a woman, you should often make sure that you are not starting out on a 50-50 relationship. This means that you have nothing to give her, and in the way that you do have, or in the way that you do have something to give her, she can give you just the same back. You don't want that kind of relationship. And I'm not talking about money once again. This is talking about levels of teaching and consciousness, right? This is talking about the intangible things that have a relation to our life and how we exist. Us compared to the environment. Once again, you should always be in a position of leader, and the position of leader is a teacher. But anyways, like, comment, and share. Check me out on Facebook. Check me out on Patreon. But until next time, this has been a Wolf in Beta Clothes. May you have a good day. And of course, definitely, peace be with you.